This show is proudly brought to you by the #Me Network.
This week's Bits of Awesome is brought to you by Need It, Want It Gadget. They're back again to support the Bits of Awesome podcast. And since this week is a bit of a Sega throwback, why don't you check out needitwantitgadget.co.nz and grab yourself a Sega arcade stick or a Sega handheld. They've got the Genesis there, or Mega Drive, whatever country you want to describe it as. Really cheap, as well as a whole bunch of other gadgets for all you nerds out there that love to get into your tech. They've got iPhone stuff, they've got gaming stuff, you name it, check them out. needitwantitgadget.co.nz. Time for the show.
Bits of Awesome, the retro gaming podcast.
Sega!
Welcome to this week's Bits of Awesome. It's a very special episode as well. I'm Phid McAwesome.
And I'm Evil Card.
And it's an awesome show this week. What can you say about it? I'd say it's the best yet. I mean, I thought we'd peaked when we got Major Nilsen on to talk about the Atari dig. Still a great episode, but this one here is just, wow.
Yeah, I must admit, you're pulling off some coups in terms of who you're getting on the show. Nearly as classy as us, of course, but yeah, they'll get there.
Oh, definitely. Now, who we've got on the show this week, I mean, it's 25 years since the Genesis was released in the States this year.
That's right.
And one of the men who arguably was probably one of the key figures to have the Genesis actually become the success it was and make Sega a household name in the States, Nilsen. He's on the show with us this week.
Yeah, with you. A little bit jealous, but you did get up at Sparrow's fart for that one, so...
Yeah, well, he Skyped us in at a convenient time for America, which is a less than convenient time here in America. I mean, here in New Zealand. But it was awesome for him to take time out to have a chat to us, and it's quite a good chat, I thought.
Yeah, I've listened over it. You got my seal of approval. It was great listening to it as a fan, rather than, putting the interview spin on it or asking questions where it sort of takes away from the experience a little bit. But thorough. It's really good.
So,
awesome.
If you don't know who Nilsen is, he was actually the marketing guy at Sega of America in the 90s for the launch of the Genesis and Sonic the Hedgehog. You name it, he was involved in the success pretty much of Sega during the console wars. And did you hear that I even pronounced it the way he pronounced it?
Sega.
He corrects me a couple of times if I'm right too.
Yeah, he does, and by the end of it, I think you're saying Sega.
Yeah. Well, who am I to say how to pronounce Sega when he's the guy from Sega? One of the cool stories, listen right through the interview because he tells this cool story about where the Genesis got its name from, and it actually surprised me.
Yeah, and I think it also interesting the Sonic Tuesday.
Yeah.
That marketing idea, all released one day across the world. Insane.
Yeah.
But back then, that's how we expected every day. Well, every game release here now. And that was, one of the first.
Yeah, well, he's the man who created it. So, yeah, make sure you listen to the full interview. It's amazing. And I'm going to chuck a plug in here for Al and for the book, Console Wars. It's an amazing book. I bought the Audible book and I love it. It took me a long time to finish it because it's basically an 8-hour podcast. And being able to listen to it start to finish was near on impossible. So I highly recommend grabbing either the book or the Audible book.
Yeah, and I hate to be that guy, but I'll admit that I haven't listened to it yet, and I just, again, these podcasts sort of coming out weird times is just because we're so fucking busy.
Oh, exactly.
So I will endeavour to download that by the end of the week. But also we've got the boss level. I need to play Californian games this week.
Yeah, I'm still yet to do it. I may even do that tomorrow. I need to chill out a bit before Digital Nations this weekend.
Yeah, mate, it's all steam ahead.
So I reckon, without further ado, we'll jump into it. It's time to hit go, and it's time for Al Nilsen.
Press start.
Just over 25 years ago in the States, I'm bound to be corrected if I'm wrong here, but the Genesis, which we call the Mega Drive, of course, here in New Zealand, was launched, and on the line right now I've got one of the men who were massively involved in the success of Sega, or as he may call it, Sega. Al Nilsen, how are you going?
Hey, great to be with you.
Correct me if I was wrong in any of that at the start.
August 14th, 1989, the launch of Genesis in the U.S.
Yeah, it must be crazy for you having this massive success, this massive interest, like 25 years later.
It really is amazing. We are so excited that people still care about Sega. They still care about Genesis and the Mega Drive, and of course they care about my little friend Sonic. It's amazing. Recently, Tom Kalinske and I have been doing a lot of appearances. We were at Comic-Con a couple of months ago, and there was this event, and we thought that, no one's going to go and show up. And they actually had to close the doors and not let any more people in because the room was full. And it's just been great talking to people and hearing their stories about how they got into video gaming and what Sega meant to them and what Sonic meant to them. Great time.
I mean, we say it on our show all the time that New Zealand and possibly Australia, but New Zealand definitely, we were definitely Sega country. The Nintendo was not a massively popular machine here. There were definitely people that were very staunch. I'm Nintendo, Sega sucks. But it was massively a Sega country. So
that's great. I wish the U.S. had been a Sega country, back in 1989. You didn't play video games in the U.S. in 1989. You played Nintendo. And for every 100 systems out there, 95 were Nintendo 8-bit systems and 5% were Sega Master systems. So we really had an uphill battle to go. And then there was a third person who came into the market, which was NEC. And they had all this money, and everybody was really betting on NEC because they thought they could go and buy their way into the business. But they were really the first people that we had to go and defeat in the marketplace, so therefore we could go after Nintendo.
I mean, time has shown since then as well, I suppose, that just because you come in waving around a checkbook, it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to beat the bigger boys in the market as well, or the better product in the market.
The bigger checkbook helps you to get your message heard, but it's not necessarily the message that people want to hear. And that was the thing about Genesis, was we had the message that everybody wanted to hear.
With the book that you were alluding to earlier, Console Wars, amazing book. If anybody has not read it, or at least gone and bought the Audible book, they're missing out on a massive story. But one thing that's constantly repeated throughout the entire book is the name of the game is the game.
Absolutely. And I've probably said it more than anyone else, but I didn't originate it. It actually originated with Peter Main at Nintendo. And it is the one and only thing I'll admit that I stole from Nintendo. But it's so true. You've got to go and have great games. And we just had a wonderful lineup, starting with Sonic the Hedgehog, and then Toe Jam and Earl and Echo the Dolphin, and so many other games. If you had a genre of games that you were into, we had a great gaming experience for you.
So when in the timeline of Sega products did you join Sega?
I joined Sega February 22nd, 1989, which was about 6 months before we launched Genesis. And Sega was really a very, very small company. There was about 5 of us in management, and that was it. We didn't have a lot of other staff. We had a small group that went and repaired master systems, and then we had the game counselors. We had about 17 or 18 game counselors who would go in and answer the phones and give you hints and tips and tricks about new games. And that's what Sega was in 1989. When I was joining and when I was interviewing, Sega had not committed yet to launching the Genesis in the United States. They were still saying, should we go and do a deal with Atari? Or are there other people to go and deal with? And actually, as part of my interview, I actually had to go and develop a presentation to convince Sega Japan that Sega should control their own destiny. So it was a very amazing time about that. And it was a very quick 6 months to launching it. I was the marketing department, and I had some good outside agencies helping me, but I didn't have any internal staff. And Salesforce was very, very small. So it was a very much startup operation, even though we were part of a big corporation, Sega Enterprises out of Japan.
So what do you think was the reason why in countries like New Zealand and Australia and the UK and Brazil massively, why did the Master System take off in these areas, but in the US it just didn't seem to have the same bang that it had here?
I think there were a number of reasons. I'm not sure of the timing in these other markets that were there. You had very, very good distributors. In Brazil, we had Tectoy, which was a super aggressive distributor getting the system into the marketplace. It was also, I think, the timing of when NES was in the marketplace. Sega Master System was late to the market. I remember going to the Consumer Electronics Show in 1985, and we see this big booth that says Nintendo. And I had been in the video game business going back to Atari and Mattel previously, and then the video game business died. And I and many of my colleagues looked at it and goes, the video game business coming back again? And sure enough, Nintendo was able to go and get themselves a foothold and convince retailers that the video game business was something there. And so I think that helped really get them entrenched in the U.S. Sega was coming in late to the game, and so therefore once again had to go up against Nintendo. It was just a very, very big start that they had in the U.S.
It must be hard for the younger listeners or people out there to sort of believe that once upon a time this industry did die. Well, came very close to it at least.
No, it died. It literally died. And that's part of the reason why we called it Genesis, because Genesis was a new beginning and a new start. And as we were looking to name the product, we actually went out and talked to kids and parents about what Genesis and several other names meant to them. And, first they came out with the Bible, in the beginning. But then they also came out with Star Trek and the Genesis Project, which was a whole new rebirth of the planet and society. So, that's really what it was. But the video game business died. It also kind of imploded.
Yeah.
There were, too many products that were out there. The quality was super good to horrendous. Retailers were being stuffed with product, and so therefore when they couldn't sell it, they marked it down. And so there was a lot of really cheap product, both in terms of quality and in terms of price. And nobody was making money. People were hemorrhaging money tremendously. And the industry went and imploded upon itself. People didn't want to go and spend money on games that weren't any good. And retailers didn't want to go and, buy something that they had to go and mark down and take a loss on. And the companies themselves, the Ataris, Coleco, Mattel, hemorrhaging money. So it really was a bad time, going back to, this was really 1982-83.
So what was the reasoning for not adopting the Mega Drive name in the US?
It was a legal thing. Someone owned the trademark Mega Drive in the US, and the classification that Mega Drive would have fit in. And so therefore we were legally prohibited from going and doing that. So we looked at, and this was actually before I came on board, with David Rosen, who was the founder of Sega, and our small management group were looking at a bunch of names. One was Cyclone, which was kind of named after the roller coaster at Coney Island in New York. Another one I forget, but it had a fox as it. And we had actually mocked up all of the boxes that were there. And one of the first things that I had to do when I came on board was to go and choose a name. So I went out and did some research saying, what is your opinions on this? What do you like? Does it give you good thoughts? Does it give you bad thoughts? Internally, we all love the Genesis name. We wanted to make sure that, excuse me, that there weren't any potential problems or roadblocks from perceptions that was there. And as I said, people got what Genesis was about. And we were actually surprised at how many people came up with the Star Trek reference. So it was a very easy choice for us.
It's pretty cool to hear that sort of the full geekery of Genesis has gone full circle right back to Star Trek as well.
Absolutely.
So you've come on board. The Genesis is ready to be launched. When you do go to release this machine to the public, what sort of education is it going to be sort of involved in letting people know that there is a second machine? It's better than what you're currently playing. How do you go about sort of educating the public into trusting a new company, a new brand?
Well, the big thing that Sega had going for it was we weren't necessarily a new company. We were somewhat a new company in the consumer products business, but we were the major powerhouse in the arcade market. And so therefore people knew about our arcade games and they loved them. And the great thing was that the Genesis was really a scaled down arcade machine so that you could go and play, your favorite Sega arcade games on a console machine. So that helped us. We weren't somebody that was new. People knew NEC as an electronics manufacturer, but they didn't know them as gaming. And so they didn't have that gaming pedigree that was there. So that helped us. What we also did was, of course, a TV advertising campaign. And we did mall tours in major markets where we went to shopping malls and let people go and play the games and see how different they were. Everybody knew what gameplay was on a Nintendo. They knew what gameplay was in an arcade, and now they could go and see and appreciate what Sega was doing. We also did a lot of advertising and talking with the video game magazines like Video Games and Computer Entertainment, Electronic Gaming Monthly. GamePro came a couple of years later. And these were talking to the hardcore gamers. And what was very interesting about that time was Nintendo had Nintendo Power, their magazine. And they really didn't talk. Nintendo didn't talk to the gaming magazines. They saved all of their best information, all of their scoops for Nintendo Power. So there was a little, hatred might be too strong a word, but the gaming magazines, the editors and the reporters, really weren't too fond of Nintendo. And so therefore they wanted somebody who could go and come in and give them a run for their money. And so what they did was they gave us a lot of space talking about our games, talking about the consoles. And this really helped to go and get the hardcore gamers on board by seeing that it was something different. This whole idea of making the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And Nintendo had a lot of enemies, or it had people who wanted, to a certain extent, they were arrogant. They were dictating terms of what retailers had to go and do. And the retailers really wanted somebody who could go and give them a run for their money. So they supported us. And there were other groups the same way.
I mean, coming back to modern times, do you think Nintendo's actually learnt from that lesson?
Yeah, hard to say because I'm not actively working with or against Nintendo right now, so I really can't go and do that. One thing in terms of, your phrase, have they learned the lesson? One thing Nintendo does phenomenally well is learn from their mistakes. And no company does it better. When there's a problem, they figure out, okay, how do we go and really rectify it? How do we go and turn this around? And they do that very, very well. So they've learned from their mistakes in the past, but I can't tell you vis-a-vis arrogance if that was one of them.
So you've released this amazing console onto the American public. You did say that Nintendo had a lot of enemies in the industry, but they also had one very strong ally in, I'm trying to remember what the name of the outlet is over there, that you guys, in the book that's talked about, took a very long time to court them.
Walmart,
that's it.
Walmart is the largest retailer in the United States, and thousands of stores. They were Nintendo's biggest customer, and they were very, very hard. They made a lot of money off of Nintendo, and they didn't want to do anything to piss Nintendo off in any way, shape, or form. And so we kept going and down to Bentonville, Arkansas, to their headquarters to go and say, will you go and do this? And this was being done at the highest levels, starting with Mike Katz, our first president, and then Tom Kalinske. And if you read in the book, it's amazing, would go down. And Tom had dealt with Walmart for decades at Mattel and Matchbox and other places, and couldn't go and get them in because they were so entrenched with Nintendo. And Tom and Shinobu Toyota, one of our executive vice presidents, had this phenomenal idea. They were literally driving in a taxi to the airport, and a couple of blocks from from Walmart's headquarters, they saw this empty storefront, and they stopped the cab. And they both looked at it, and it was kind of like mutual brainstorms. And it's like, well, if Nintendo, if Walmart won't come to us, we'll come to Walmart. And we opened up a Sega Genesis arcade, and we had all of our displays that you'd find in retailers and our mall tours. You could come in and play for free as long as you want, and boy, was it packed. And with giant Sega Genesis signs. And then we put billboards all throughout Bentonville, Arkansas, especially on the roads that were going to and from these Walmart executives' homes. So as they were driving to and from work, they'd see Sega Genesis. And then there was the big University of Arkansas football game, which is something that everybody goes to. And we bought seat cushions with Sega Genesis on them. And finally, the senior execs at Walmart went to the buyer and said, what is this Genesis and why aren't you going and carrying it? And finally the buyer had to go and relent and say, I give up. I'll take Sega Genesis. I'll start carrying it. Just close that store. And we were happy to go and do that. I've never heard of another example where a retailer was able to go and get into Walmart the way we did. But it's just an example of the things that we did, thinking out of the box, thinking of different ways that we could go and do things. And Walmart became a great customer and was very, very happy with their business, but it just took a while getting there.
So were you there for the Game Gear launch as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So how did that go? Like, what was that like taking on, which was definitely, arguably still to this day, the most successful handheld would be the Game Boy?
It really was a watershed moment in terms of here's a product with you're able to go and play the great Sega games, but in a handheld. And it had the one major difference between Game Boy and everything else, and that was color, the color screen. It was higher priced than them, and quite honestly, Game Boy just had such an entrenched market share, but it was great being able to go up against them. And we did fabulous advertising with Goodby, Berlin, and Silverstein, where they literally had a dog who was sniffing a Game Boy and a Game Gear. And dogs are colorblind, but the dog went and chose Game Gear. And that was a commercial. Nintendo was not happy when we went up against them, but when we went and started comparing, Nintendo to a dog, that was something that they really weren't very happy with. But the consumers loved it. When we went on TV, they were talking about it in schools. They were talking about it at water fountains. It was just such a compelling commercial.
I remember being very confused as a child why people weren't gravitating towards the Game Gear more so, because in my opinion it was the better machine. It was colour, it was faster, it was better, it was... the only thing I remember hating about it was that it just chewed the batteries, but it was a better machine in my opinion as a kid, and I remember being so confused as to why people wanted this black and white thing.
I think that there's a couple of things. One, there was a major price difference between the two, and at one time I think it was $100 more than it. People had their Game Boy and they kept going and using it. The other thing was that that a handheld system was the second system in a household. And Mom and Dad had just bought a Sega Genesis for the family. And now you want me to buy another console? If you want a portable, you already got your Game Boy. I'll buy you some Game Boy games if you want to go and play them there. So I think that was something that was one of the reasons why Game Gear was not as big as Sega Genesis, but it was still really big and still did really well. And one was another thing that just had a great dedicated fan base.
So we've had a bit of a chat about the console. Now, why don't we have a bit of a chat about your mate, Sonic?
Okay. Where would you like me to start?
I think we've all sort of heard the story about, Nintendo had Mario, you guys had Alex Kidd for a long time. What was it like being able to finally have an exciting character to give the people?
Well, let me even go back.
Oh, okay.
Alex Kidd was fine, but he wasn't an icon. We didn't think that he rose to it.
I'd agree with you there.
And when we looked at games that they were coming down, it really didn't demonstrate what Genesis could go and do. They really didn't go and feel 16-bit. And what was astonishing to us was we're going to go and hold a contest in Japan to choose a mascot to go and beat Sonic, and it's like, what a crazy idea. It's because it's always, let's go. The usual has been try on a couple of different fronts and see what comes out best. And this was, no, we're going to go and put all our resources behind one thing. The strangest day was it must have been 1989, when Shinobu Toyota, our executive vice president, walks into my office and closes the door, which was very strange. We were very much an open door environment. And he says, I come bearing a message from Mr. Nakayama, who is the head of Sega. And that always goes and makes you say, uh-oh, what's going on now? And he has this big manila envelope and pulls out and goes, we've had this mascot contest, and Sega Japan is very happy with two of the entries. They'll work fine for Japan, but we know that it has to be huge in the U.S., So you choose which one. And it's like, okay. And he pulls out, opens the envelope and pulls out these 2 drawings. And the first one was this egg-shaped thing, kind of Weebles, if you're familiar with a preschool toy.
Yeah.
And in the U.S., it would come off very preschool. And we were trying to sell not just to kids, but also to teens and tweens and young adults. We were, as opposed to Nintendo, which was just kids only. So that wasn't there. And then the second one was a hedgehog. And we're going, what's a hedgehog? Because we really don't know hedgehogs in America. We know groundhogs. And he was blue, and his name was Sonic, and he had fangs, and he had a girlfriend who looked like Marilyn Monroe and was named Madonna, and then he had a rock band. And it's like, okay, how many wrong things could be with this character? And it was like, okay, Sonic was the least of 2 evils. At least there was a possibility that it would have broader appeal than the egg. And it's like, go with that. But I never expected anything to happen with it. I said, get rid of the rock band, get rid of the girlfriend, because music is very, very particular. If you have the wrong music, that can go and kill a great game to begin with. And I just didn't need a human girlfriend to go and get in the way of great gameplay. But I never expected to go and see anything come of this. Fast forward a few months, I'm in Japan touring through one of the R&D groups, and I see this black and white kind of wireframe background with this Sonic character going at breakneck speed. And it was just, wow, I had never seen such speed in a video game before. And then they took me over another monitor and showed me the backgrounds, which they hadn't put into the system, and the bright, vibrant colors. And that's like, can you really go and put that, this great speed together with these backgrounds? And it's like, yeah. And it was amazing. And I came back to the U.S. and started telling, Tom Kalinske and Paul Rio, you aren't going to believe what Sega Japan has done. And then about a month later, we actually saw the 2 merge together, and I was getting everybody at Sega excited about what was happening. And we actually put a clamp down on secrecy because we didn't want it to get out that we had something that really had potential to be a star. And luckily, we were able to get Sega Japan to agree to this secrecy, which they had never done before. They love to leak information, as much as possible, but they were unable to do that. Now, then we got first playables. And I actually went out and did play tests across the country with not just Sega owners, but Nintendo owners, and primarily Nintendo owners, and most importantly, primarily people who stated that Mario was one of their favorite characters and Mario was one of their favorite games. Because I knew if I could go and convince them, then we had a winner. And I let them play not just Sonic, but I let them play Super Mario World on Super Famicom because we had brought systems over from Japan. And so here were 2 games they had never seen on 2 systems. Well, on one system, the Nintendo system that they had never seen, and then on the Genesis. And then we asked them to vote. And 80% of the people chose Sonic over Mario. And it was like, if I can go and convince Mario lovers to not only go for Sega, but go for Sonic, we've got a winner. And that became our secret weapon. And the book really goes into whole detail about what we did to go and really thwart Nintendo and change the mindset of people. And thwart actually the introduction of Super NES in the U.S.
So, you've released the machine, you released Sonic. It's around about a year or so later you come out with Sonic 2?
Yeah. What's interesting, and once again, I urge you to read the book.
Yeah.
Because Sonic 2 almost never happened because Yuji Naka, who was the lead designer and programmer behind Sonic, quit Sega. And he just wasn't happy with Sega Japan. And he was going to go to another company or start his own business. And we wanted to have a sequel for Sonic 2, but without Naka-san, you're not going to go and get that specialness. And Shinobu Toyota heard that Naka had left, and he literally flew to Japan, went to Naka's house, and said, I want you and your team to come to the U.S. And he did. It was amazing. And so we actually put them up in the U.S. We set up a separate studio about 7 or 8 miles from the Sega headquarters. So it was really, really private down in Palo Alto. We limited the number of people who could go there. And, it really became this kind of studio that, was our secret. And the thing about game sequels or movie sequels or book sequels is the sequels are not necessarily as good as the original. And we were hoping that, Sonic 2 would be as good. Okay, we'd love to have it even better. Madeline Schroeder, who worked for me and was product manager, and we lovingly refer to her as the mother of Sonic, she was the person who would be down at the studio looking and seeing what they were doing. And she starts coming back and going, they're doing new things. It's starting to look real good. They've added a second character. He's a fox. Okay, I think this is going to be as good as Sonic was.
I think
say better. It's just as good. And slowly but surely we start seeing stuff, and it's better. And it's got new things, and it's like, this is exciting. And that's when we went and started saying Sonic 2 deserves a marketing program that is going to be the best in the industry, because we know that this game is going to go and be the best thing that was out that year. And we just developed this incredible marketing plan, not just for launching Sonic in the U.S., but for launching Sonic worldwide on the same day.
So you're almost the creator of what we now know as a standard issue sort of global launch.
Oh, absolutely. It's, personally what I love to do is I love to do the things that everybody else. Sonic 2 was something that had never happened before. There were no such things as street dates. And there was no such thing as, major spectacle launches for game titles, which are all commonplace today. We had a big smile on our face when the following year, Mortal Monday came out for Mortal Kombat. It was like, okay, been there, done that, and we're on to the next thing. But Sonic Tuesday really revolutionized how video games are marketed. And we pulled out all the stops from A to Z. And the great thing was we were able to go and do it on a worldwide basis and get all of our partners around the world to go and be able to do it. And it just worked amazingly well. But if you had told... when Madeline and I went in to go and present this to Tom Kalinske and the rest of the executive team, we literally thought that they would go and tell us that we were crazy because it was just so big. There were so many different elements, and it wasn't just going from A to Z. It was like going from A to Z and back again and back again and back again because of all the little details. And then we're going to go and have to fly everything in the day before because we didn't want it to go on sale earlier, which was the previous problems because video games would come out over a 2-week period, just whenever the truck would get there. And so we had to revolutionize how to go and deliver it. And then you want to do this on a global basis right before Christmas? Can we go and get everything there in time? And after Madeline and I were done presenting it, Tom Kalinske turned to our head of sales and says, what do you think? And Rich Burns, our head of sales, goes, I don't know how we can pull this off, but we have to. And that was really the quarterly went into overdrive. And in that meeting, we actually called in our head of operations and warehousing and said to them, you have to go and figure out how to go and get game cartridges to arrive at 13,000 retail locations the day before and not a moment earlier. And you have to do it for the same price as shipping it by truck. And he accomplished it. And then we have to get the retailers on board, and getting the retailers to go and do things and change the way that they were doing it. Unheard of. It was amazing. But that was the thing about Sega was. There was no, that's impossible.
It almost seems like there was no rule book there.
So hot. Sorry, I didn't hear that.
It almost seems like there was no staunch rule book of this is how things have always been done, let's do it that way.
We had thrown out any rule book that was there. We were all experienced in, not just the video game industry, but toy industry and dealing with retailers, and we had done that. And we knew what the standard rules were. But when we saw things that would go and say, here's what's right for Sega, here's what's right for the consumer, here's how we can go and make something bigger and better. When you read the book, you'll read about a meeting that Madeline and I had the day before we had to go and present this. And I just went and kept going, this isn't big enough. It's not big enough. It's not worthy of what Sonic, it's not worthy of Sonic or even the game Sonic 2. How can we go and make this bigger and more impactful? And it just happened. And we were all pushing ourselves to go and do the biggest and the best. And it was just a phenomenal team of people that we had, not just in marketing, not just in sales, but in operations and in warehousing, to go and do the impossible, getting the accounting and finance groups to work with the retailers to get them to change their policies. Going and working with our partners at Sega Europe and in Brazil and in Australia and New Zealand and the rest of the world to go and do this massive launch, and then taking PR to the whole next level. There's the whole story in the book of what we did with this video news release and how we really pissed off Bill White at Nintendo, which is always one of my favorite things. Any time I could go and stick it a little to Nintendo, that was good, because the name of the book is Console Wars, and to us this really was a war. It was a war for the hearts and thumbs of gamers everywhere.
So I was looking through your Twitter account the other day, and I saw actually that Sonic 2 almost had a revolutionary cover sleeve as well, let alone a revolutionary game.
Absolutely. One day, our head of merchandising, who's the group that develops all the graphics and packaging, got a call from a guy who made holograms. And he went and said, why don't you go and do a hologram label that could either go on the cartridge or go on the package? And thought it was interesting because it was a different look, as something that would stand out at a retail shelf, and which was important because you'd go into a game store and you just see a wall of games, and if you had something that could really go and stand out, that could be exciting.
I mean, back then that's how we chose our games. It wasn't by YouTube videos and stuff. It was what did it say on the back of the box? Boy,
and did we spend a lot of time not just choosing the right words, but also the right screenshots. And we'd go literally over hundreds and hundreds of screenshots to make sure that we had the right ones, which would get you excited about wanting to go and do it. But before you turned over the box, you had to have a great cover.
Yeah.
Because we had to entice you to go and say, oh, that could be interesting. Let me go and see what the back cover looks like. And so this guy went and said, why don't I go and make up some samples for you to show you what it's like? And he told us what the specifications were for the artwork, and we gave him some artwork. And created these great labels. And that had Sonic and Tails, and they were hologram labels, and they were fit perfectly on the game cartridges. And we thought it was cool. It looked cool, but it really was too expensive. And it was just something that wouldn't work from a financial standpoint. And people have said, well, why don't you do a special edition and thing and charge people more? We wanted the message to be simple. Buy Sonic 2.
Yeah.
I don't want you to say, buy Sonic 2 or buy Sonic 2 the limited edition, and then people who couldn't afford the limited edition, they get pissed off. So we decided against it. And there's only 280 of those on the one roll, and I have the one roll of it. And if you look at my Twitter account, at Al Nilsen, ALNILSEN, you'll be able to go and see pictures of some of those holograms.
And I see people have already tried to no avail to try and get some of those labels off you.
That is very correct. People said, well, you can make a lot of money putting those on eBay. No, it's not. Don't want to go and do that. It's just a nice memento. I've given a couple of people, colleagues, but nobody else.
So I imagine you must have like this little treasure trove of things that the rest of the gaming or game collectors in the world would just love to have get their hands on.
Well, I have a few things, and it's some prototype cartridges, various different levels, early Sonic stuff.
So, what
prototype hardware as we went? Oh, what?
I was just about to say. So, what was it like the first time you saw or heard that Sonic was going to be going onto a Nintendo device?
I actually thought it was very, very funny. It's one of the things that going back, and if you read in the book where we introduced Sonic 2 was at a big event in Boca Raton, Florida, where I was giving a speech. And Madeline and I did this big speech about introducing Sonic Tuesday. And one of the lines in it that I said was, and Sonic's going to go on and be the cover of every single video game magazine. And Madeline goes, ow! And I go, okay, he's not going to be on the cover of Nintendo Power. But Sonic's trying.
Yeah.
And, fast forward 20 years, and sure enough, Sonic appears on the cover of Nintendo Power.
Yeah.
So I wrote a letter to Peter Main and Gail Tilden going and saying, thank you for making my prediction come true. It was really interesting to go and see. I like being, where you're able to play side by side with Mario, having the two come together. But I always want the best game experience to be when you're playing Sonic.
So, I mean, there's so many more stories amongst in between all these stories you've told today. And, one of the ones that I love is how you had to take Tails from basically, in my opinion, a horrible concept to a great concept. But I'd recommend anyone buy the book to hear all the rest of these stories. I think one thing that isn't really covered in the book is round about the time that you leave. There's at the end of the book, it's got where you're going through the process of wanting to leave the company and move on. Did you at all, after you leave, get back involved in video games at all, or did you just leave the industry altogether?
Oh no, I was still in the video game industry, and it wasn't that I wanted to leave. I love Sega.
Yeah.
I had seen Sega grow from this little small company to we had probably over 350, maybe 500 people that was there. And it wasn't that you no longer played, Nintendo. You played video games, and there was this great Sega fan base. If you read the book, you can go into all the reasons that was there. But I still love the video game industry. I went to work for Viacom, who owns MTV and Nickelodeon, to go and help them go and start their video game business. That was there. I actually came back, and after I left Sega, Shinobu Toyota and Tom Kalinske brought me back as a consultant because they wanted to know what was going on in Japan. And they wanted to know this is as the Sega Saturn was getting ready to come out. And what the quality of games were and what games should be out there and which ones should be brought over into the United States. And so I went over and spent a week at Sega Japan, literally playing and going over and meeting with the programmers and the teams for every Saturn title that was in development, both first party and third party, so I could go and make recommendations back to the U.S. and then find out some other things that were there. And so I've been doing work in video games over the years. Right now I run my own marketing consultancy in the video games, toys, consumer electronics, basically the whole consumer area. I do work on apps and different things, a lot of strategy for companies. So I still keep my hand and my finger in it, but I'm not doing any work for any of the console companies, the Microsofts, the Nintendos, the Sonys of the world. But my phone is, I'll always answer the phone if they want to talk.
So what is your relationship like now with your former competitors? The people, not so much the company. It depends on by person. I think we have friendly relationships. Because it was very cutthroat at the time.
Oh, it was, and it was, and it would be very interesting as we would meet each other at analyst meetings and at various meetings where we would both be doing presentations about our companies, and those were very, very sometimes stressful times. The book tells about a meeting in New York between Tom Kalinske and Peter Main, which was very interesting. My competitors, I would not call them friends. I was a couple of months ago, I was on a panel at Toy Fair, not only Tom Kalinske and Blake Harris, who wrote Console Wars, but also with Bill White, who was kind of my counterpart at Nintendo, and Perrin Kaplan, who headed public relations and communications. And so it was a very pleasant time that we had.
So, what was my next question? Completely gone. When you were still with Sega, you moved on to global marketing for a time. Did you have any involvement in dealing with the way Sega was marketed by AussieSoft in New Zealand and Australia?
What we would do is, I never got to New Zealand or Australia while I was at Sega, but I would meet with the people from Sega AussieSoft at least twice a year at the consumer electronics shows. And it comes to mind, I think it was maybe even 3 times a year where we would go and sit down with them and, talk about what was happening. My job was not to go and dictate, here's what you need to do. Because one of the things, and this was as we were getting ready with Sonic Tuesday, was every market is different. How people think, what gets them excited, what the competition is. And so therefore, one global approach to marketing isn't going to go and work. The big thing is, how can we go and work together, and how can we learn from each other? And so what we started to do, and part of what my new job was getting us to meet regularly and talk regularly so that we can learn best practices and worst practices, the things that worked and the things that didn't work, so that we could go and share. We created this great artwork. We created this great giveaway. Would you like to work on it? So therefore, instead of buying 5,000 of them, we could buy 100,000 of them and really lower our costs. And also go and be able to reduce timing, reduce manpower needs, having to go and do things twice, or 3 times when you're trying to go and do the same thing. And it was something that we had informally done with Sonic 2, where we learned here's what every group is doing. Wow, I really like that piece of artwork. And so therefore we'd bring it into the US, or would go to Europe or Australia or into Japan. And so we could go and coordinate. So those were the things. But going and saying, here's what you have to go and do, that wasn't something that we had any intention of going and doing. The closest we ever came was, we are going to do Sonic Tuesday, and it's going to be on this date. And you figure out what you want to do with it from there.
Now, in the book, there's many stories about opportunities that were sort of lost and opportunities that were taken advantage of. But one sort of underlying story throughout the entire thing is there seems to be a bit of a battle between SOA and SOJ at times. What do you think was at the heart of that?
It's... I think that there's not one pat answer for that. I think part of it is that we were doing things differently than had been done in the Japanese market. The first time this came about was when we were doing competitive advertising. The campaign, and one of the campaigns that and don't. And in Japan, you don't do competitive advertising. You don't go up and compare yourselves to your competition. And that really didn't go over too well with Sega Japan. And so there were these cultural differences that were there. I think that there may also have been a little bit about a parent and child relationship, and then all of a sudden the child is being more successful. The Mega Drive never got more than 15% market share in Japan, while we had a 65% market share in the US, and we actually beat Nintendo. At times we may have looked arrogant, because it's kind of like, here's what we need in order to continue the momentum. And so it was difficult from that standpoint. The big thing and there were multiple groups, and each group had different types of interests. And so, I think in any corporation there are, disagreements about it. This was exacerbated, I think, a little bit because there was 5,000 miles between us. I would be over in Japan every month and a half. Tom Kalinske was over there six times a year. And this was also before something called email.
Yeah.
Our main purpose, and then also think of the time difference. Our main way of communicating was by fax. And so we'd have to write these long faxes and then wait for to get the answers back and forth. So those are all things that, contributed to it. And so it's, as I said, there's not one stock answer to it. It's also, I think there's just relationships between various people. I had a fabulous relationship. There's one story in the book where we're touring R&D, and Tom Kalinske, saying, are we seeing less and less things? And it was because they didn't want to show Tom something in its early stages in case he'd want to kill it. And look at it was there.
Yeah.
I once went over with some of my colleagues, but also some people from R&D in the U.S., and we walked into one of the R&D groups, and virtually all the monitors were turned off, and nobody was working on games, and they were all scribbling on pieces of paper and things like that. And it's like, yeah, we really have nothing to show you, which was very strange because, as I said, I was there every month and a half, and I knew what was going on. It's like, this is really weird. And as I walk out, the head of R&D goes and says, "Come back in 10 minutes by yourself." And it's like, okay. And we went up to a conference room, and everyone's going, "Wow, Sega Japan really doesn't have anything, to show us. There's really nothing in development. This is really strange." And I know differently. Yeah. So 10 minutes later, I said, "I got to leave. I'll be back in an hour." And they said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going back down. They're going to show me everything they don't want you to see." Because there were people from our R&D group who they didn't trust. And so therefore, they wouldn't go and show them what they were working on. But everybody on my group in marketing, they would go in and see everything that was going on because we had built the trust and the relationship. And if there wasn't something that we thought would work, I could go and tell them, and they wouldn't mind because they were taking it as good input, and together we'd figure out how to go and make it better. So it's all very much, personal relationships.
I think, if anyone wants to hear the rest of these stories, we're just about at an hour with our chat today, so I do recommend people go out and get the book. The only question I have regarding the book is, would you say it's a very accurate book and the stories in there are very true to what has actually happened?
Absolutely. Blake Harris, I first got involved with the book about 2.5 years ago. And when Blake Harris, who wrote it, got into contact with Tom and Kalinske and started talking about it. And Tom, we all talked to a lot of journalists and a lot of different people, but Tom went and said, "Blake understands this industry. Blake gets it." And I got an email from Tom saying, "You need to talk to this guy." Interviews might actually be close to 300 interviews with people from Sega, people from Nintendo, from our third parties, from retailers to analysts, and really got a well in-depth idea of what was going on. And there are stories that have never been told before on both sides. And he does a good job of getting you in the mindset of what's going on. And that's why we've been excited about talking about it. It's the first book that really we think does a great job talking about what really happened in the console wars. And we're excited that there's going to be a documentary that has already been filmed, which is in its final editing stage right now. I don't know they're still working on a release date, but I think it's probably going to be early next year. We have Tom's in it, I'm in it, my fellow colleagues, people from the Nintendo side, talking about it. And then, if that wasn't enough, there's the movie.
Now that must be very strange, being a white collar corporate employee 20 years ago. All of a sudden, that story is interesting enough to be a movie.
I don't even want to think about who's going to go and play me or play anybody else in it. How true are they going to go and tell our story? Yeah. Excited that Scott Rudin, who was the producer behind The Social Network and a ton of movies and TV shows like The West Wing, is behind this because he just does wonderful quality work. And then you've got, the star power and the amazing background of Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who are actually going to be writing the screenplay behind it. So, it's really interesting group who has come together and who wants to go and tell this story. But we're not thinking about it, it's kind of like, okay, right now we're just busy with the book, and soon we'll be busy with the documentary. The movie, when it happens, that's going to be a whole other wild ride for us.
Well, I thank you for coming on the show, and I do thank you and Tom and everyone else who has told these stories as well, because, as a Sega fan, or a Sega fan. It was very hard to find any information on the history of Sega in the past. There was a lot of stuff about Nintendo, there's a lot of stuff about Atari, but the Sega stuff was just very hard to get our hands on.
Yeah, not a lot of people had written about us and or knew what questions to ask. And that was the thing about Blake was he started learning about this business and he asked great questions. And we started to go and tell him stories we had never heard before. You talk about and pulling stuff out of our files that we had never heard about before. When you talked about tails and renaming miles per hour tails, what you see in the book is the actual document, the actual historical document, the actual document that we used to convince Naka and the Sonic team to let us call him Tails. And this enabled all of that and similar things from everybody else, enabled Blake to tell the really true story, not just based upon what our fuzzy minds after 25 years want to remember.
Will you be coming to New Zealand in any stage to win any of our gaming events?
Right now, I have nothing planned. Tom Kalinske and I and Blake Harris have been doing a bunch of events here in the U.S. We're actually going to be at the Retro Gaming Expo in Portland in October. I've been to New Zealand once about 14 years ago, loved it, and would love to come back, but I have nothing planned.
Awesome. And I do thank you very much for taking time out to have a chat to me and our listeners.
Thank you. My pleasure. Follow me on Twitter, as I said, at Al Nilsen, ALNILSEN. And, every now and then I pull something out of my closet and that you may never have seen before and share it with it. And if you have any questions, that's the best way to go and reach me.
Yeah, and I do know that you do answer almost everything as long as it's a good question too. So,
if it's a good question, yeah, that's yeah. The great thing, and I once again, I and the rest of my colleagues, we are just so happy and excited and amazed that people are talking about all these things 25 years after the fact. That you still remember Genesis does what Nintendo don't. That you remember Sonic Tuesday. It's who remembers marketing campaigns, but people are talking about them, and people talking about what their favorite games are and why they like it. My favorite game is Sonic 2. And we just thank all of you for going and doing this. It was part of our excitement was getting to talk to people back then and seeing how people were happy playing the games. We loved doing the mall tours because that's where we were actually going out and watching people going and playing. And to go and see, the love of those games. 25 years later, thank you, thank you, thank you.
#me.co.nz